Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It's Thursday, July 26th on a hybrid Sam Seder, Michael Brooks Thursday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Sam's interview with Randi Weingarten. She's the head of the teachers union. They're talking about education in the age of austerity and Trump, union activism and organizing from the grassroots, and the future strategy for the American Federation of Teachers. That was an interview that Sam recorded a bit over a week ago. And then we will take you into the fun half. Separated parents were totally unaware that they had waived their rights to be reunited with their kidnapped children. Trump and the EU announced a deal. What?
Gotta read the fine print.
Gotta read the fine print. Trump and the EU announced a deal to avert the escalation of trade tensions, very similar to the North Korea deal. There's nothing in it. It's aspirational. Totally aspirational. Donald Trump's poll numbers are sinking and sagging and getting to a sad and sunken place in key Midwestern states, Michigan and Wisconsin.
I'm going to pretend you meant to say poll numbers because that works really well.
I did say poll numbers. You didn't hear me.
That's not what you meant.
I know. I got it. State Department defends allowing the publication of blueprint for 3D print guns. Nice. Very good. Looking forward to that. Dropping a little Peter Thiel. A Coke plan to raise prices amidst Trump's proposed trade war. And more than 200 killed in southern Syria as the Islamic State launches a devastating assault. Yes, that multi-pronged imperial war is still happening. And Trump has cut aid to the UN Relief Agency so it can lay off staff in Gaza and the West Bank. And in a positive piece of foreign news, 29 members of Congress, including Senator Bernie Sanders, Keith Ellison, Maxine Waters, Ro Khanna, Barbara Lee, and Mark Pocan, have written a letter to Brazil's ambassador protesting the imprisonment of Lula da Silva, his violation of his human rights in the lead up to the election. The anti-democratic investigation moves to block Lula from running, as well as the fact that the assassination of Marielle Franco has still not been addressed, as Brazil's austerity lawfare government powers ahead and a fascist candidate runs second in the polls to the imprisoned Lula. All that and more on today's Majority Report. But let's start with a piece of, just news. And you can process in yourselves whether you think that this is funny, whether you think this is awesome, whether you think that this is actually really uncivil.
A sign of decline.
A sign of decline. It's up to you how you interpret the fact that Betsy DeVos's $30 million yacht was vandalized at a Huron dock.
No.
Betsy DeVos, Huron, Ohio, a boat owned by the family of U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, was vandalized over the weekend, moored at the Huron dock, according to the Huron Police Department. The Sequest was moored at the Huron boat base at 330 Main Street, according to a police report. And apparently, what somebody did was they just undocked it. They just cut it from the dock, and it had a little bump and a little boo-boo. And I don't know if there was actually literally, of course, in the comedic scenario, Betsy DeVos is like, there's a new charter school plan where we were thinking to ourselves, why can't children in America stitch Nike shoes for 5 pennies an hour? And so it was a really interesting market-based initiative to help poor kids. Let's go talk about it on the Sequest. Oh,
And the guy,
what the darn?
The guy who did it's like, oh, I didn't set it adrift, Betsy. I gave it a voucher.
Yeah, I didn't set it adrift. I gave it an opportunity to participate its own a free market and exercise its own free will into where it wanted to dock. Betsy was like, Betsy DeVos, who is, I believe, what is she? She's related, she might even be siblings with Eric Prince, the head of the former Blackwater. I don't even know what the latest name of the global mercenary firm is now. And also, I believe, the wife of a guy whose fortune was built on the Amway distributorship.
Oh, yeah, they're brother-sister.
My brother's mercenary involved in horrific atrocities across the world. And my husband made a stupid amount of cash based off of idiots who thought they could make 6-figure salaries selling Tupperware. And I'm destroying education root and branch from making it easier for rape to happen in colleges to taking away school lunches. Quite a life. Oh no, what happened to the Sequest?
I feel bad for whoever did that to my boat because that was my brother's favorite boat.
Oh boy. You'll find my brother's a lot less forgiving than me.
We're gonna have Eric booby trap the next one.
I remember when Eric would stick dynamite up cats' rear ends as a child. I was thinking, wow, he's either going to end up in prison or run a global mercenary firm for the most evil aspects of U.S., Chinese, and Qatari foreign policy.
If it turns out this was tanky Lena Dunham, I'm going to have to seriously consider evicting her from my brain.
Would tanky Lena Dunham go to Milwaukee, though?
No, to Ohio.
Oh, Ohio.
Huron, Ohio.
I'm going to go wherever the rabbit needs me, all right? Like, it's really important and stuff.
I mean, she did go to Iowa for the writer's workshop.
Hey, it's Betsy DeVos. What happened to your boat? So, yeah, that was news that happened. And I like the effect, Matt.
Sounds like someone read that Hamilton Nolan article where he said that folks should start sinking the richest boats.
Hamilton Nolan. I don't think that's explicitly what he said. He
said
made a atmospheric broad argument which people could interpret and run with.
Stochastic.
He said their yachts are going to get
He was
sunk.
being sarcastic.
Stochastic.
He was being
okay.
sarcastic.
Yeah, it would be really
Stochastic.
irresponsible to tell people to actually do that.
Yeah, totally. Never would celebrate that or joke about it. Or
It's not funny.
It's not Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp is affordable, private, online counseling. You get unlimited access to a licensed therapist, fully trained therapist that's perfect for you on your phone and computer through text, voice, or video chat. They're LGBT friendly. It's great for couples counseling or anything else you're going through in life right now. All you need to do is go to betterhelp.com/majority. You fill out a questionnaire and they match you with a counselor who's perfect for you, and you can start counseling today. And if you decide you don't vibe with the therapist you've been matched with, you can switch whenever you want. It's less expensive than in-person counseling, but you're still getting the same great help from licensed professionals. And if you have trouble affording it, BetterHelp even has financial aid available. You're always connected to your counselor. You'll have unlimited access, which means you can talk to them every day if you want. You connect from anywhere you're at home, work, or on the go, so you're not wasting time traveling to someone's office and sitting around in a waiting room. A lot of people are not comfortable talking to a therapist in person, or they simply don't have time, or they can't afford it. BetterHelp solves all these problems. You can sign up right now and save on a quality professional therapy by going to facebook.com/majority. We are going to go to Sam's interview with Randi Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers, and then we will be back with the rest of the show. Hold on.
All right, so sitting with me is Randi Weingarten. She is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, and you've been so for about 10 years now. Is that right?
Yep.
And just
And I am running for re-election this year. I guess I should have said that, but today, but I
fair
am.
enough. But before we get into sort of some of the issues they're facing, the American Federation of Teachers, and really all public sector unions now in the wake of Janus, the Janus decision at the Supreme Court. Will you just walk me through just briefly, because there's the AFT, there's the UFT, there's the NEA. Just delineate for us what the differences are on the teachers' unions, and in fact, the AFT is not just teachers. So you should just walk us through that just very briefly so everybody understands.
Okay, so there are two big unions that are predominantly teachers in the United States of America. The NEA, which I think is a little bit older, started as the professional organization of teachers, like the American Medical Association, the American Nurse Association, and they then, in the 60s and 70s, basically transformed to a union, meaning that they started doing things like representing people in collective bargaining. Okay. The AFT started about 100 years ago, maybe it's 102 years ago right now. We celebrate our 100th year anniversary in 2016. But we actually started as a union. So Local 1 was the local of teachers in Chicago. And they organized in the traditional ways you think about labor. They organized as a union to try to demand conditions of employment and wages for people there. Local 2 is the UFT, and Local 2 actually started as in New York City as all sorts of different groups of teachers. So you had the high school teachers, right. You had the elementary school teachers, you had the female teachers, you had the male teachers. And what happened in Local 2, which is my home local, was between the late 50s to early 60s, they all kind of came together as the United Federation of Teachers. And now we have 3,450 locals. So the biggest one being the UFT, with over 100,000 members, and the smallest one being locals of 2 and 3 and 4 people.
Now, that strikes me as that history strikes me as obviously relevant just in terms of the history, but that dynamic of a bunch of locals coming together now seems to be somewhat thematically important.
Absolutely.
Relative to this sort of post-Janus period.
Exactly right, Sam. And I'm so glad you intuit that, because we have 5 merged states, meaning 5 states that are basically both AFT and NEA. And I was at the NEA convention, and Lily Escosin Garcia will be at the AFT convention. And the 4 biggest public sector unions, those in the AFL-CIO, like AFSCME and ourselves, and those who are not, like NEA and SEIU, we have worked together in an unprecedented way. But the big difference between us, our culture in terms of the AFT, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. We think it's important. The big difference is that we are a federation of locals. So the local is chartered by the national, and we believe that the unit of organization that can create power and agency is a local, not an individual. Because what you can see, whether you organize as craft unions, as the actors have in our country, as the building trades have, or whether you organize wall to wall, as the UAW did, or as we have, the key to trying to ensure that people have a pathway to a better life is to have power. And we believe that centers not on individuals, but on a local working together and organizing together, because they can accomplish what people individually can't. And what just happened this year with West Virginia, with Oklahoma, with Arizona, is even though those states don't give the same kind of stronger labor laws as a state like my home state of New York, they don't have collective bargaining on the local level. They don't have collective bargaining at all. They organized, they mobilized and organized in the truest sense of how unions gain power, working together collectively on issues of common concern, and they became a human shield in those capitals, so that politically those red state governors had to solve the political issue because there were too many teachers on the streets working together in solidarity.
Right. I mean, it was a very sort of, I guess, for lack of a better term, naked use of withholding labor.
Correct.
I mean that was really
exactly
what it comes down
right.
to. They was what they were doing was.
But they weren't naked.
Well,
we just had to be really clear because we are school teachers.
Yes, indeed. And so, all right. So now, this audience, I think, is very familiar with the Janus case. It was sort of the Friedrich case Part 2, but Scalia had passed away and had saved public sector unions, and we now live in essentially, in terms of public sector unions, a so-called right-to-work country, which means that, of course, you always had the right to work. I mean, to the extent that the employers will hire you, subject to the employers. But now, agency fees, the payments for the negotiations, and I think probably even more expensively, the issues that come up under the contract, whether it's...
So this is the difference. First off, I think the word right to work is the biggest misnomer I've seen.
Of course, right.
But what has happened is that a lot of these right-wing groups that, frankly, first, who didn't want integration in schools, didn't want integration in the workplaces, they started doing things that would separate people from each other. And they used the pretext of choice, but you saw it after Brown versus Board of Education. You saw it in what happened in Virginia afterwards, where all of a sudden school districts closed because they said, well, we want to give people the choice of, going to this elementary school, also known as we do not want to integrate this elementary school. Right. And we saw that in labor as well around the same time. Right to work was about not allowing an integrated workforce and starting to pit people against one another. Having said that, what has happened in the Janus case was that it overruled basically 45 years of precedent where about 23 states, under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, had made a decision that it was in the interest of labor peace and efficiency of services. If workers wanted to, they could create unions, and that the public employer would bargain with the unions just like GM bargains with UAW.
Right.
And
I have 10,000 employees.
Right.
I don't want to negotiate with each one
exactly.
of them. I want to have... Right.
But the obligation of the union, which gets lost in a lot of this, was that if they had the solemn responsibility to bargain the contract, then they bargained for everybody.
Right.
And the obligation of people was not to join the union. People didn't have to join. but they had to pay a fair share for the work that the union did in representing them in contract negotiations for health benefits, for pensions, for salaries. That's frankly what just got busted up.
Right. That was the ruling from the Abood, Detroit versus Abood.
And what happened, and the last thing I'll say is what happened was what Abood said 45 years ago said that Abood took the First Amendment issues, the free expression issues off the table, because Abood said, you, union, if somebody doesn't want to be involved politically, they don't have to be involved politically. What you have the responsibility for doing is the terms and conditions of employment. So the issue of political expression hasn't been an issue for 45 years.
Right. And this is, and we should just say
that's why this case is so ideological, and why Justice Kagan said it was weaponizing the First Amendment.
Exactly. And we should say, and I want to get more to how you're responding in this particular environment that we're in and those things. But we should say that this is just one element of the weaponizing of the First Amendment. We just saw it in a case about fake abortion clinics in California. The First Amendment is being used, literally wielded in every direction. That just depending on what the preferred outcome is.
It's being used as a sword.
Exactly.
As opposed to what the original intention was of the framers and the founders, as a shield so that people could engage in political speech and not be discriminated against by the government when they engaged in that political speech.
Right. There's this whole theory that is being developed of forced speech, and the implication is that by paying for services that are required by your employer, right, it's really basically... And they're going to do this when it comes to washing your hands in the if you're an employee, washing your hands. It's some type of forced expression.
Look, they may bring a case. I mean, this all started, frankly, if you think about it, Citizens United, Justice Kennedy, basically equated unlimited corporate donations as political speech.
Right.
So that was the first time all of a sudden money became speech.
And so there's a whole
I
a body of work on this.
Sorry.
Yes. No. And again, I point people back to this. I think it was Haley Sweeten Edwards had written about this a couple of years ago about the weaponizing of the First Amendment. But all right, but more to the point in terms of what you're doing here. Give me the reaction. Like what? Obviously, you saw Janice coming, at least since the 2016 election on November 9th. I would imagine that was one of the first things you started to think about.
You mean that elections have consequences?
That elections have consequences, but that Janice, you saw this coming down the pike. People knew there was another one in the pipeline as soon as it got picked up by the Supreme Court.
Well, let me just be clear as a legal matter, because the right wing is now actually using that argument to try to see if they can get retroactive application of Janice. So I want to be, meaning there's now 17 cases that the right wing has brought after Janice, some of which trying to say, oh no, because Justice Alito has been talking about this for the last 5 years, you saw it coming, therefore you should have 5 years ago.
So you're saying clawback?
Yeah.
Agent, oh my God.
I'm like, so I want to be, I'm not,
Wow.
I'm not being funny about this. I want to be.
That's insane.
So it's insane. But when you have a Supreme Court that no longer is doctrinal, but is just ideological.
Right.
You have
everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table.
Okay.
And so, but let me. So what we saw is that I actually sat through the Friedrich's oral argument, and I sat through the Janice oral argument. I pretend that I still practice law every now and then.
And there's big stakes.
And I wanted to hear it. And so in February 2015, Lee Saunders, the head of ASME, came to our executive council, and we had talked about this beforehand. And from that day forward, we started planning a very different strategy about member engagement. We've always wanted members to be engaged in the union, and frankly, when they are, the union is much stronger. But what the shift was that this was now an imperative. It wasn't precatory, it was mandatory now. And we had to think through how we shifted culture from a culture of members feeling like, okay, they elected their local leader, they elected their state or national leader, and then the leaders did the things. Right. And we had to figure out a way that the members not only felt that power, but were engaged and connected and saw themselves and saw the stakes saw themselves in the union and saw the stakes very clearly.
I mean, this is broadly a problem that we have with our citizenship in this country.
Right, exactly right.
It changed
because voice, exactly right. Because voice became, well, it's, it's somebody else. I did my job. I elected somebody, and then people stopped voting and on and on. So we had to really change culture to a culture of reimagining engagement and reimagining recommitment. And so that started for us in February 2015. And it started by one-to-one conversations. And so if you look at our resolutions dating back to April, May of 2015, we put ourselves on a course of how we're going to have, and we were going to have, one-to-one conversations with all our members that started as simply as, how are you? What's going on? Knocking on people's doors, having these meetings in school meetings or site meetings, showing up. And you see from the themes of our convention, caring, fighting, showing up. And so the run-up to Janus was much more about what we were going to do to re-engage our members in the union as not transactional, but a part of their lives.
And I noticed in your speech, in fact, I wrote this down as obviously the theme, but you said there, you had at one point a bit of an epiphany that member engagement and community involvement around issues that matter is the pathway for a better life, but also I imagine the success of unions. So I mean, and then I think
I often say, community is the new density.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I know that we touched on this, and I think the last time we spoke was a couple of years ago, but on this burgeoning, and maybe it's not that burgeoning, but social justice unionism.
Right.
And in some respects, I mean, is that what, are you saying something similar there?
Yes.
Okay.
But what the difference between what I did today versus the conversations you and I have had beforehand, and even any speeches that I've given at the AFT, is that the formula, spelling it out, it's not rhetorical anymore. I used examples that people in that audience saw because they have been doing it. And so this was really a reflection, a mirroring back to people of what they've been doing. And frankly, I believe it is the path forward for us, because you have right now, and Hillary Clinton actually said this by using Dickens' words, you have a juxtapositioning in this country between basically oligarchic, authoritarian, cronyistic, kleptocratic takeover of most of the organs of national power versus tremendous activism on the ground of people wanting a better life. And it is that kind of David versus Goliath battle where people seem to get it, and it feels like, will the will of the people prevail, or will the oligarchy prevail?
Do you think?
It is social justice and economic justice. It is in some ways what King said in the "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963. As
part of that is engaging in the community, because I want to talk about, like, what does that mean, A, and B, do you think teachers are uniquely situated to do that, or do you think that maybe there's certain advantages that teachers and frankly nurses on some level as well? I mean, they have a similar dynamic in terms of there's a set group of people who there's not as much like a pull. There's a pull coming from the community as opposed to a push that would have to go for the teachers. I mean, being a parent of 2 kids and
let me just
the son
say,
of frankly older parents. I mean,
let me just say this. I think it's more, I look at things these days through a lens of values and responsibility. And I think because teachers and nurses are really the caring professions, that we are skilled to care and to help nurture, nurses, the body, teachers, the brain. And so we are in a position of great responsibility and can, as a result, if people are willing to do it, help move cruelty to decency. And that's what I think you see. I mean, teachers shouldn't have to do this job. Just like teachers shouldn't have to take money out of their pockets to buy supplies. But it takes a really special person to want to be a teacher or a nurse. Frankly, I would argue who wants to be a probation officer, who wants to actually be a civil service who's making sure the water is clean in Montana. So we, in some ways, I'm one of the luckiest people on earth because I get to represent the people who really care about other people.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is...
So I think the answer to your question is yes, but it's not opportunistic. That's why I'm answering this way. It is because of who we are as people. And the dilemma is because our governance structure right now, because in some ways it's been hijacked. I think the Republican Party has been hijacked too. If you look at Steve Schmidt and what he talks about, or even Joe Scarborough, and frankly, I gotta tell you, I have sparred with them a lot, but on the issue of democracy, if you hear them, I mean, not on the issue of economics, but on the issue of democracy, they're
Steve
pretty
Schmidt, the
upset.
The guy who gave us.
Yep. You don't even have to finish answering.
I'm just saying, Sarah Palin didn't come out of nowhere,
right?
But Joe Scarborough, who also I would say, I mean,
listen, I'm married to a rabbi. I believe in redemption.
That's all well and good. That's all well and good.
No, I get your point, and you're right.
I'm perfectly willing to allow your husband to go and provide your wife to go and provide the redemption. That's fine. So
anyway, seriously, I'm sorry.
Well, no, but I want to ask you because. All right. Aside from it not being opportunistic,
yeah. So I
mean, that's fine.
I agree with you.
But I am looking at it from a pure strategy and power. I want to just look at this from a purely a power perspective.
Right.
Okay. So, and I think there is a natural tendency for teachers, obviously, and nurses. Their jobs are to care about people, and so they're going to develop these relationships.
Correct.
But there's also a strategy to this, and there's also going further than just the parents too, right? I mean, there's also
and in
you
fact,
have questions as to where else are we going to exercise this power that we have and to leverage these relationships that we already have with the community.
Correct. And in fact, if you remember, and frankly, there were corporate Democrats who were as guilty as this as Republicans like Betsy DeVos. Joel Klein was one of them. Michelle Rhee was one of them. That they actually tried to strip teachers of that dignity and those relationships and that strength during the last recession, basically trying to say over and over again that the biggest issue in teaching was tenure. As opposed to the biggest issue in teaching is how do we recruit and retain great teachers for all our kids? How do we pay them sufficiently enough so that they're not doing 3 or 4 or 5 jobs? How do we have the tools and conditions so we meet kids where they are and help nurture them? And if somebody is not doing their job, due process should not be interpreted as a job for life. There should be real evaluation systems. But we had to actually fight through that garbage that was thrown at us in state after state after state as a pretext for austerity and for laying teachers off. And what's happened now, in 25 states still spend less money on education. And what you saw in West Virginia, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Colorado, Arizona, was teachers basically saying, look, I love doing this job, but I can't keep on working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs.
Right.
And I gotta actually feed my own family. And this is what was so amazing. And when you try to pit me against my students, I'm not taking the raise and you taking that out of my students' hide. We need to actually have enough money for both, for the kind of conditions for kids. And I think what shocked the country was how much public support teachers in these red states got for what they were doing.
I spoke today to one of the Oklahoma City president at the AFT. And he, I think, said that even they were surprised that nothing after a couple of weeks, there was not the sort of fall off that he had anticipated.
Right.
People are still bringing, and so I guess.
But that activism that we saw in those red states, that's also what you're seeing. Well, it is and it isn't. And the reason I say it is in terms of activism. The reason I say it is and it isn't, because there are the issue about collective bargaining is absolutely an essential pathway for working people to have a better life. So what I think you're also seeing in those states that were the blue states that just lost agency fees as a result of Janus, you see also an incredible model of re-engagement and of actually doing more political work in those states. So the irony in both the states that had collective bargaining and the states that didn't have collective bargaining is that you're going to see more political action. That what Alito and Kennedy tried to snuff out actually is going to backfire hugely because people will be more politically engaged. And that is the model. Now, would it be better if a lot of problems actually got solved? There's numerous problems in education or in nursing. At a bargaining table where people could talk them through? Yeah, of course. But what you're seeing now is that they're not going to be talked through, and the employer or the state is not going to respect people. It's not going to be the Koch brothers that employer is going to have to reckon with. It's going to be teachers and parents that are saying, you need to solve these problems because public education is a public good for our kids.
If I was asked you to take a bet, is there going to be more, put aside what just happened, obviously this will implicate your answer maybe, but is there going to be more withholding of labor in the next 5 years than there was in the last 5?
Yes, and Alito will end up, look, Alito's dismissiveness and derisiveness of the issue of labor peace is what elitists do. Because they live in their little white towers where they don't actually engage with the people. And what has happened is that when you had collective bargaining, both in the private sector and the public sector, you saw less strikes. You saw less stoppages of work. When you had it in the public sector, what you saw is people ended up solving problems at a bargaining table. And if you don't have that ability to do that anymore, or you have less of that ability to do that, you're going to take it on the streets because these problems have to get solved. The issue about having enough wages to live in a democracy for yourself and your family. The issue of making sure that you're not one illness away from bankruptcy. The issue of making sure that there's public education for special needs kids. Making sure you don't have class sizes of 60 or 70 so you can't teach kids. These are legitimate issues. Right. And if we can't solve them at a bargaining table, we're going to try to solve them because this is what people need.
Do you anticipate having more conversations with unions outside? I mean, obviously, you guys are affiliated with the AFL-CIO. I mean, but do you anticipate sitting down and looking across industries that you may not have ever sort of contemplated in the past and saying, you know, we need to have some solidarity that transcends union affiliation, industry affiliation, even genre, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, is that?
And it's
are we going
to
see more of that?
Look, first off, Lee Saunders and I both went and spoke at the NEA convention. Mary Kay Henry, Lee, Lily are all coming here. We did a video together. Those are the 4 largest public sector unions. Larry Cohn and I have talked about how to have some conferences on sectoral bargaining. Now, Larry is no longer the head of the CWA, but we are really thinking through different kinds of ideas. The Democrats in the Senate and in the House of Representatives have 2 or 3 really good, intriguing bills that, if they were in the majority, would pass on how you empower labor. Some ways of growing traditional bargaining paradigms, some new ways. But I do think that this does call for re-envisioning a new way of workers working together, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because collective bargaining is a really important way that you create a better pathway for people. It is the root. That and the ballot box are the route to the middle class. But think about, and I mentioned this in my speech, the teachers worked with the steelworkers in Messina, New York, to put pressure on Governor Cuomo, Senator Schumer, the company itself, to keep the Alcoa plant up in the North Country. That was working together in a way that nobody expected. But we understood that if we don't have that industry in the town, how are people going to be employed? We're doing that with our pension systems, where our pension systems are arrayed together to try to build infrastructure and create jobs. We also are using pensions or talking to trustees about these hedge funds who try to eat up companies, take them over, and then throw and then close the plants.
Right.
So there's lots of different ways that we're talking together, some of which is done under the auspices of the AFL-CIO, which has a futures process going on, but some of it is being done bilaterally between and amongst unions.
When you look back over the past, I mean, the past 10 years, but you've obviously been a union member for years before that, are there moments where you look back and you say, you know what, maybe we should have at that time? Like, you look at different junctures.
Yes,
maybe
there's a lot of would have, could have, should have. I mean,
what's one of the big ones?
Well, let's look at Wisconsin, and I would actually say 2008 to 2010. And, I've had some of these conversations with President Obama when in the tail end of his presidency, like on the issues of education. But I would have pushed that administration much, much harder. For me, it would have been a litmus test that if Joe Biden and President Obama said that they were going to walk those picket lines, they needed to be out there when Scott Walker basically stripped people of rights, because no one was prepared for what happened in 2010. There was we had a terrible recession. The president, the vice president, others, they helped with the stimulus they did get us out of that recession. But the right wing was ready to bear, or was ready for bear. And the moment the 10 election happened, what did they do? They went after labor.
Sure.
They went after public education. They went after voting. We all know
within months.
You know,
I mean, it was 4 months after the 2010 election.
They did it quickly because they knew if it took them a long time, then we would have won those fights, not lost those fights. And you saw immediately the collapse of the labor movement in Wisconsin. And that was a woulda, coulda, shoulda. And today we had, frankly, several members from Wisconsin, from Milwaukee, and we took a picture and we looked at each other and I said, we have learned the lessons of what happened in Wisconsin. You are not seeing post-Janus that result. What you're seeing instead is members understanding that's the right wing that's trying to take their rights away. They are really pissed and they're sticking with the union.
What was the lesson though, specifically in that context? I mean, yes, Obama had said, "I'll put on my soft walking shoes."
The lesson was we weren't prepared. The lesson was that it's the culture change that I just talked about.
I see.
It's the sense of, and I say this often.
You have to be in a constant state of preparing and building power.
Exactly.
Even before you need to use it.
And it's not building power of the leader, building power by her or himself or with a group of a few people. It is, how do you create a shared sense of ownership in a real way over a shared sense of values so that people own it? People see it. People don't want to lose it. It's like the story I told about my cousin, about her local leader showing their contract versus the piece of paper in Texas. And that is one piece of the story. But to me, the more important piece of that story for me was to hear her then proudly talk about her involvement in the union, and that she was now taking ownership, that it was her power, and it was not, what is the union going to do for you? It's, wait a second, we could lose this if we're not engaged. That's the transformation, and frankly, we did that in the Capitol in Wisconsin. I was in the Capitol. I was in Madison. It was amazing. It was amazing to see the farmers supporting us, but we did that with activists. Now, what's happened is that we have engaged the vast majority of our members who see, whether they're going to be active or not, that the union is important to them. That's the difference, and that's what's happened in the aftermath of Janus. That's why when we heard people today, the recommitments that, because in January of this year, so we started down this path of one-to-one conversations and engagement, but in January of this year, we talked to lots of different folks, and we started on the path of recommitments, recarding. And that's, we already have 530,000 people of the 800,000 people affected by Janus who have recarded. And that's why now the Freedom Foundation has said in Washington State, oh, no. None of the cards that were done before June 27th are legal. No, that's bullshit. It's a frivolous lawsuit. With a judge who understands the Constitution and wants to apply it, you would get attorney's fees for that kind of frivolity. But that's what I mean by the 17 cases against us.
All right, and let me just ask you. I mean, so we have a vision of what unionism is going to look like. The irony is too is that I know that if we had this conversation a couple of years ago, we would have been talking about the so-called education reform movement, and you mentioned there were Democrats, and Arnie Duncan. I don't know what your perspective is.
I found it pretty funny that he was starting to call for student walkouts because of gun issues.
Right.
I mean, look, I understand the frustration, and I think it's right. We have to do something in the aftermath of Parkland.
Right.
But I found it a little ironic.
Yes. Arnie Duncan was not exactly a bottom-up type of
right.
But
I supported it, but I found it ironic.
Bill Gates Foundation, just very quietly the other day, the Rand Corporation came out with a report that got virtually no news. Basically said, like, that's $700 million. Whoops. The whole teacher evaluation thing, yeah, we got that wrong. It basically said it's about inputs. If you want to help education, it's about inputs. Kids can't show up to school with a vocabulary deficit. They can't show up with a nutrition deficit. You got to deal with healthcare. You got to deal with the community. And that $700 million, of course, was also exponentially, a lot of people spent money in that direction because that's where a bulk of the money went. And so there was this whole movement. That seems to have sort of like completely fallen apart. There's a new battle here, but do you feel like things on at least a philosophical perspective on education have actually improved?
Yes.
While the material...
So frankly, and I know a lot of people don't give her enough credit for this, Hillary Clinton, in running in 2016, helped hugely to put these battles to bed, as did Barack Obama in the willingness to negotiate and agree to the new ed reform law, ESSA, because a lot of the overreach of No Child Left Behind and of Race to the Top got muted in the new law through the prohibitions on the secretary. And so you had Democrats like myself who said, oh, no. We need to prohibit the secretary from mandating testing as part of teacher evaluation, because that was part and parcel of what created the testing fixation.
Right.
We have to mandate that the Secretary of Education can no longer demand that schools be closed. We have to mandate that the Secretary of Education can no longer require a set of standards or curriculum. And you know, if you had asked me 10 years ago as a Democrat, 20 years ago as a Democrat, would I ever have been fighting for that? I'd be looking at you like, wait a second, I thought, war on poverty, Secretary of Education, it's about expanding equity. But because of their overreach, including Democratic overreach, because Democrats, that's why I did this in the speech today as well, Democrats as well as Republicans, corporate Democrats as well as Republicans, thought they could reduce students to test scores and teachers to algorithms.
Right.
And we fought that back. And if you looked at the Democratic platform that the Bernie folk and the Hillary folk all negotiated together when it came to education, it wasn't perfect, but it actually was a template for how to resolve these issues. And then on top of that, you had a Betsy DeVos who basically gave up the pretense that charters or vouchers was about equity. It was really just about privatizing a school system and having people fend for themselves.
Right. When she talks about public education, she's talking about a pool of money that she can channel to
Correct,
to
exactly.
private schools.
So then what you have is these corporate Democrats who say, well, am I with public education or am I with her?
Right.
And so she has in some ways forced their hand. And so, there are still charter folks like, look, the LA School Board, and the fact that Ref Rodriguez is still on that school board is terrible. But there are still battles like that. But when you have the NAACP saying, look, we want a moratorium on charters until the equity issues start working for all the students, and then you have what you just have seen throughout the country, which is people believe in public education, they think teachers need to be more respected and have the latitude to do their job, have to be paid more, so we actually get teachers who are not just basically living paycheck by paycheck and being crushed by their student debt. So
all right, lastly,
anyway.
let me ask you this, because you raised the 2016 election. There was some controversy about the timing of the endorsement. If you had to do that over again, would you do the process different? Would you, with the timing, with the process, are there any reforms relative to that, or what?
Well, I mean, the answer is, of course, yes and no. I thought I would actually push very hard for the 2016 election to have done what we did in terms of moving early. Because you either, in the 2016 election, you either chase the race or you or you frame the race. And on the issue of public education, we needed to make it quite clear that the issues that we were pushing for needed to be forefront, not the corporate folk like the Michelle Rees and the Joel Kleins, who had basically tried to hijack the Democratic Party away from teachers, parents, and those who actually believed in music and art in schools rather than testing. What I would have done differently, and what I didn't actually understand at that time, was how the climate and the distrust and the frustration had so poisoned every institution. And Tim Schneider has said this a lot in his book, 20 Steps for Tyranny. But at the end of the day, the moment somebody says everything is rigged, it doesn't, because we had more interaction, more engagement before that endorsement in the primaries than we'd ever had before. Not just polling, not just town halls, not just talking to people, but people who disagreed with the decision didn't believe that any of that had happened. So that the issue in retrospect was, how do you create trust in a situation where people don't trust? And that's what the issue was. In terms of going forward, I think you have to wait and see. There's a lot of people that are coming out. You got to see what's going on. But frankly, more importantly than anything else, I'm fixated on the 2018 election, right? Because we have to win enough in 2018 to move cruelty to decency and to defend our democracy.
Randi Weingarten, President of the American Federation of Teachers, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
I love it. Stop relitigating 2016 unless you're like actually figuring out lessons to learn that are relevant. 2018 is paramount. Good interview. That's a good example of people who are maybe in a different place than I am, as an example. It's politically, how they move, though, and how they learn and adjust, because they do have actual convictions.
Well, it shows the side of like cultural change, right? Like,
right.
They endorsed Hillary, and now she's using words like corporate Democrats and
right.
things like that. Like, you can tell the language is sort of the early signifier.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. That's how this whole thing happens. Over 90% of it is because of you. Check out justcoffee.coop. Here, fair trade tea, coffee, or chocolate. Get the Majority Report blend. Give the Majority Report a review on iTunes. Subscribe to the Majority Report YouTube channel, which is just serious growth.
Long, sustained growth.
Long, sustained growth. We haven't seen growth like this before.
Ever since late November. Something happened when something happened.
Something happens. I would recommend that certain YouTube channels look into it really carefully. I love to feed dumb people's paranoia.
Mike Sturmett, Sturmich.com.
Been growing about 750 to 1,000 subscribers a day since late November. Something happened. Late November.
Something happened then.
Who's laughing now, Sam?
I think that was Sam's pound for pound best moment, when he got to be like, oh, I'm laughing now.
Do you remember when we played Bad Boys for Life, like the day after MSNBC rehired Sam?
Yes.
That's been I don't know if there's a greater moment of triumph in my life.
I also enjoyed, I have to say, and whatever, I'm not trying to bring this back up again, but when Dorr did his whole thing he had his whole meltdown on me, presumably because I was on the TYT panel, and it was like, all right, I'm going to need to take care of this on TMBS. And then it literally ended with and until then, shut the fuck up. And then it was like, bow out for life. Bad Boys for Life really can. It gets you in that mode. They had a magic. On TMBS on Tuesday, we did a deep dive with Marisa Bararadaran, who wrote The Color of Money, and we talked about the history of banking, capital formations of this country, and then, of course, the Sam Harris intellectual dark web, repackaging old right-wing ideas for a newer audience that have been discredited for decades, and the sociology of why they do that. New bits. Nelson Mandela own Zionists with facts and logic. We have the Griscom Economic Minute, which is a new segment we do now. There was also Iran content and a lot of other things. And if you become a patron, you get Woke Bros, which I co-host with Big Wozni Lambre, joint production with Count the Dings. And then also, of course, Illicit Histories and Idea Primer series. As an example, this Sunday, Zach Carter and I, an illicit history of trade from Ricardo to Trump. So patreon.com/TMBS. Check out the new TMBS YouTube channel. We've been up for 48 hours and we just went past our first 1,000 subscribers. That's a great way of sharing, shorter content to spread the word on the Michael Brooks Show. And we're also on iTunes as well. Thanks, everybody. What's up on Antifada, Jamie?
Well, we have a new episode dropping today, whenever Sean wakes up and posts it, wherein we talk to our friend Wilson Sherwin of the CUNY Grad Center about the National Welfare Rights Organization, which came out of a radical movement in the 60s and 70s, composed mostly of women of color who came around to some fairly radical anti-work politics via collective struggle.
And that's connected with Frances Fox Piven, right?
Yes,
Frances Fox Piven is a boss.
She really is.
Very important person.
She played a foundational role in it, and she is also, not coincidentally, the thesis advisor of Wilson, who's currently working on her thesis on that topic. So we talk about that. We talk about Marxist feminism and all the silly stuff that I mentioned yesterday, like nutcrackers and dating as a Marxist feminist.
Hey, baby, put down that pipe and get my pipe up.
Exactly.
Literary Hangover, Young Goodman Brown came out this weekend. We've just passed 500 subs. 503.
Sweet.
Moving on up.
Steadily.
You can watch it on Twitter. No, you can't watch it on Twitter. You can watch it on YouTube and all the places, or most of the places that, any of the places that people have bothered me that you want to listen to it on podcasts. I put it there also. So,
very winning strategy. I've delivered it in all the places where you've harassed me about wanting to see it.
I'm responsive to that.
Yes. And also Patreon.
Patreon.com/literary hangover. We're at 75.
Sweet. And Brendan's Patreon project is, I'm sure, going to be happening at some point. I mean, it's inevitable.
I'm gonna see what's up with the Majority Report before I branch out into the wiles of Patreon.
Brendan's food reviews.
He's biding his time.
Brendan. I think Brendan should do reviews of Dead concert bootlegs.
No one's going to pay for that. The music's free.
No, but
but not your commentary. You could use the free music and then explain, like, the year was 1979.
I would be going
the disco era was at its heights, and people thought the Dead were irrelevant.
It's like me with the
small
Nixon tapes.
group of community members were still gathering.
I would be stepping on this guy Grateful Dean's territory.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
You guys ever go on like YouTube like holes and just like find things?
Not for Grateful
never.
Dead.
Well, it was a rhetorical question, but anyway, there's this guy Grateful Dean that
That's
I
a good
found
name.
who just like has reviewed every like show and the ones that are going on now, and he's like hilarious. It's like listening to someone do like a sports review.
What if you? Well, that's what I was thinking for you. What if you did every episode was another variation on why the Dead are awesome and Fish suck with Brendan? That would be fun. I would listen. I would definitely listen to that.
The
by the way,
narcissism of small differences with Brendan.
Yeah, then you
see exactly. He knows that what you just said is totally wrong.
The
and
problem
you can break
is-
that down over hundreds of episodes.
But there's already a fish podcast too. There's Analyze Fish.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and his response podcast could be Jerry's dead, fish sucks, get a job.
It's a more crowded
Yeah.
market in the jam band podcast.
Well,
game
I
than
had
you'd
no
expect.
idea. All right, we're gonna go to the fun half, and we're gonna do the same great new transition song we have from. Sorry, remind me the name.
Bullprog.
All right, thank you, Bullprog. See you-
Tart on SoundCloud.
Okay, see you in the fun half.
Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good.
Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
That is exactly the move. Like, I just want to flesh this out, and by which I mean take over the mic and shut out everyone else from speaking.
Step away from the mic.
Step away from the mic because I want to flesh this out. Hello? All right. Let us get to the phones. We are in the fun half, and I'm sorry to keep doing this, but I could just tell you out of the gate, we're not going to get to all calls today. Sorry. You're calling from a 612 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, you got me on?
Yes.
Cool. Michael, I heard you on Polite Conversations podcast.
Oh, with Ina. That was a lot of fun.
That was great. She's great.
Yes, she is. I had a great time with her. She's really good.
Yeah, very recommended. The one thing I wanted to call in about is it's been mentioned a few times, this issue with atheism and the new atheism, and it sort of bothers me that's what atheism has come to. I myself consider myself a skeptic, an atheist. I try to be rational, but dear God, they've just gone crazy. And I think that there was a time when the atheist movement was, pretty much focused on pretty simple issues, combating fundamentalism and authoritarian beliefs in religiosity and stuff like that. And then they went a whole lot of them went full right wing. And there was, and speaking on the politically polite conversation, she had a conversation some time ago about the new atheist or the atheist meeting in the Milwaukee Atheist, and Sargon, somebody that you've interacted with, Sargon of Akkad,
yes,
was there, and the audience was just horrible, and it's just, I don't even know what it just makes me almost ashamed these days to call myself an atheist, because it's just been overtaken by, and I think that the proper term would just they're epistemic nihilists, if you want to put it that way. I mean, I'm not.
I would say they're kind of just recycled positivists with bad foreign policy and racism. But I mean, I'll say this in one hand, and I know I'm like Mr. Anti-Atheist apparently, but I would say that like actually you shouldn't be.
You are?
I don't think so either, but people are very touchy.
Some of our listeners.
Some people get very touchy, but I would actually say that I don't think you should feel ashamed to be an atheist at all. I don't actually think that these people in any way represent, certainly not. It's funny if you read even people like Durkheim or, like first, atheist thinkers were very serious, and they were very, informed about religion, and they didn't think it was some awe-inspiring accomplishment to understand that that the world wasn't 5,000 years old. I think that these guys, though, where maybe I get, there might be a little bit of pushback, is I do think that whether you're an atheist or agnostic or believer, whatever, the seeds of it were in how people like Sam Harris wrote and spoke about Islam. If you could look at anything so ahistorically, if you could have such a one-dimensional description of something so complex, that was going places. And the reason that I was always concerned about it was not because I'm not a secret Muslim, which was one of my favorite. I hope that theory can get resurrected, that I'm a secret Muslim, because I saw that out there as a serious thing, and that was awesome.
Jamal.
Yeah, well, I've always thought of you as a Muslim. I've always considered you
thank
a Muslim.
You. Spread it, please. Thank you.
He's got at least one Muslim living in his brain.
At least. And who speaks for, but I would say that was, but I wouldn't, I think it's actually it would be quite great if, thank you, Brenda, I didn't realize she was hanging up, but I think it would be great if atheism could be decoupled from this kind of like weird reactionary little subculture.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I don't know. I guess I've done enough psychedelics, so I'm now more agnostic than straight up atheist. But maybe it would be better to define ourselves by what we do believe in rather than what we don't, which is why I like the term secular humanist. It just feels a little more positive to me.
I'm totally with you. I actually think, in fact, that you would find people who are more left and progressive who might have religious beliefs, but actually identify as secular humanists with regards to what actually matters, like having a secular public square and not having a state religion and teaching science in schools, these things that actually matter. You're calling from a 734 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 734. 73, goodbye. All right, let's do some sound. So, I was just reminded, but looking at the sound sheet, that Betsy DeVos's yacht got vandalized.
It was.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just
did a little research
mood boost.
too.
Yes,
it was one of 10 yachts.
We're laughing because we're so sad.
10% of her yachts were vandalized.
Whoa,
Damn.
that's so depressing.
Damn.
That's such a bummer.
She only has 9 left? How's she going to sail around the lake in only 9 yachts?
What is this lake nonsense? Get to the French Riviera. People don't even know how to spend their freaking plunder properly.
Hey, lakes can be fun.
Yeah, lakes can be fun to swim in, I mean, lakes
Jet
are like
ski,
Not Lake Erie.
jet ski. Like what? Yeah, but that's exactly it. Like that should be some good down home. All right, what is this, Matt? I don't. Which ones
This
do you
is
have up?
Mattis talking about basically how we should invade Iran to get Assad.
Russia's not the problem in Syria. It's Iran.
Okay, so Russia, who has been supporting to the hilt the Assad regime in Russia, whose tempo of airstrikes, I think the statistic, I think that Jeremy Scahill said about a year ago, the rate of civilian casualties that Russia was inflicting on Syria was for the first time in in the modern era actually exceeded for a period of time U.S. civilian casualties from all of our kinetic activity across the globe. And now General Mattis, who is, of course, people should be looking at his conduct in Iraq, especially in Fallujah, is now getting himself back into the center of things with the Trump administration. And this is a really, look, the amount of energy that people both sort of, all Russia all the time versus people who are, so concerned about how Russia's misunderstood in World War III and all this stuff, I would say take down 40% or 50% or 90% of your interest in that and get serious about what's happening with Iran, because it's incredibly dangerous, and that actually could be a war. And this clip of General Mattis speaks to that.
What we have to look at is the destabilizing influence that Iran has consistently portrayed and demonstrated throughout the region. And the only reason that the murderer Assad is still in power, the primary reason, is because Iran has stuck by him, reinforced him, funded him.
So that's partially true. It completely downplays Russia, which has provided the aerial supports and a lot of diplomatic cover for Assad. And also, let's look at reality here. Iran has definitely also propped Assad because of its own regional geostrategic interests, even for the same reason that the Saudis and the Gulf have flooded Salafist far-right groups fighting in Syria, who have committed massacres with support. And the United States is obviously engaged in its own aerial bombardments in support of Gulf-funded groups as well. But the other reality is that groups like Hezbollah and Iranian militias, who have certainly, like every single other actor there, have committed many crimes, on the ground, they've actually been people that have in some cases protected Christians, protected Alawites, and other minority communities. And the reality is, if you're talking about destabilization and regional wars in the Middle East, you better have a globally integrated strategy that deals with Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Gulf, and Iran, because they're all playing these games, not to mention to which the Saudi air war in Yemen, which continues to this day and is potentially the worst humanitarian situation on the planet. But the target is on Iran. So everybody needs to get out of their Russia obsession one way or another and get obsessed with an area that they've already detonated the greatest modern diplomatic accomplishment, the Iran deal, which Obama administration and its partners in the Rouhani government negotiated and implemented successfully. And now we see a rhetoric, and especially coming from Mattis. He's not part of the crazy nut job, Bolton warlust ring. He's part of this military industrial apparatus, which in the context of Trump was supposed to be the people that occasionally injected, obviously not ethics or morality into it, but some rationality. And if they're going in on this, that's incredibly dangerous. So that's what we need to be focusing on. All right. This was interesting. Remember how a couple of weeks ago when Trump was in the UK and a CNN reporter, I think it was Acosta, tried to ask a question and Trump went, fake news, fake news. And then the reporter for Fox was just like, I will take that question. Thank you. Of course, this was after years of other press organizations pretending that Fox was anything other than a 24/7 propaganda outlet.
Remember when we stuck up for Fox News when the Obama administration put them in the back of the room?
You know what's so funny is that when Jake Tapper did that sanctimonious little, why didn't Fox do it for us? I'm so surprised. All I could think of was that people should have just been tweeting at him Trump's, you knew I was a snake when you let me in. Like, you idiots. And now here is a CNN reporter, Caitlin Collins. This is after the press conference with Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, who announced a nothing burger deal, literally like the tariff equivalent of the North Korea thing. Like, we're going to go towards like non-tariffs, and it's huge. It's great. By the way, Juncker, through austerity policies, is sort of responsible for a pretty fair amount of human misery himself. No shabby record from Juncker. Caitlin Collins is going to ask about the leak of the Michael Cohen Trump call, the "Get Me a Coke and Pay Off Somebody" call, and she is going to be banned. Check this out.
Did Michael Cohen betray you, Mr. President?
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President.
Keep moving, guys. Let's go.
Did Michael Cohen betray you?
Start moving,
Are you leaning towards tariffs on cars, sir?
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is going to say to prosecutors?
Thank you, Caitlin. Let's keep going.
Are you worried about what is on the other tapes, Mr. President?
Thank you all.
And apparently she was... Later, she was called into White House Deputy Chief of Staff Bill Shine's office, where Shine and White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders disinvited her from the next press event. And now journalists from a wide range of organizations, including Fox News President Jay Wallace, are jumping to Collins' defense and speaking out against White House actions. And this is, first we'll go to Bill Shine. Bill Shine, of course, was... apparently, as far as I understand, intimately involved in helping manage the Fox News global sexual harassment ring, and now
helped back the dump trucks full of money that
had
to deliver the settlement cash with.
Right, settlement cash with, and I would just look up Bill Shine, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, and the whole cabal of them. And I guess, frankly, if we're not living in a world where Bill Shine is like doing penance in a work camp, I guess it makes total sense that he works at the Trump administration. It seems like a natural move. Also, look up Bill Shine's wife. Now, here's Bill Shine talking about what happened.
Ask her if we ever use the word ban. I've seen it on lower thirds.
What word would you use, Bill? What word would you use?
When you ask her if we ever use the word ban, then I will answer that question.
You prohibited her? What's the word you would use?
You ask her, focus now. You ask her if we ever use the word ban.
Okay. So that's just the classic what they do. That's just, let's get lost in a second order pedantic nonsense. There was some troll who used to tweet at me all the time, and it was a Sam Harris troll. And what was interesting was that every single thing was always like you tweet out a piece on the Supreme Court upholding the Muslim ban, and the headline of this particular piece was white supremacist decision, and which, by the way, it was. That is a objectively accurate statement. But the response was always like, how could you expect to be taken seriously with a headline like that, even if you are right about the case? Something to that effect. These people always do second-order pedantry. So it's like, did Bill Shine and Sarah Huckabee Sanders technically say that she was banned? Maybe they didn't technically use that word. The upshot is she asked the president a question he didn't want to have asked, and she was not invited to cover the next event. Okay? And that is a substantive attack on free press, even if it's a relatively trivial tabloid story.
Even if you think the media is lame.
Even
right.
if you think CNN is lame, we could all stipulate all this stuff. That matters. That's an attack on the press doing its job. And whether or not they use the specific word is, I'm going to go totally irrelevant, not just borderline irrelevant.
Almost insultingly irrelevant.
Almost insultingly irrelevant. And anybody who's trying to get you caught up in that second order conversation is either a liar, hack, or concern troll, and should be dismissed as such.
Hey, they didn't tell her she was banned, okay? They just asked her to please leave and not come back. Also,
right, sure.
I said barred.
I just looked up who
she was barred.
Just looked up Bill Schein's wife.
Oh,
and
you took the suggestion for
apparently,
some research there on Bill Schein's wife.
Of course.
Yeah, Bill Schein's wife, not good.
Apparently, she said that women in the military should expect to be harassed, and she's also very upset that she's not allowed to use the N-word. So there you go.
Yes. Well, no, I think she said anticipate, not to be harassed. She never said expect. Never said expect.
Oh, my bad.
Totally misleading. See, we can do that kind of bullshit too.
See, Bill will spill the beans on your wife.
Bill, I never started anything. Yeah, and if you come back at me about attacking Bill Schein's wife, I'll say, I never said anything about the wife.
I didn't say anything with the wife.
You said do research. I didn't start anything with the wife.
Careful, lion shine.
Lion shine, lion shine.
It's so weird that this is just a thought I've been having. It's so weird that we blame like middle America for like the bad racism or like, the flyover country. And it's really just a handful of guys from Long Island that have access to like wide streaming television stations.
They are the main problem. Brian Stelter has the quote. This is from Fox News. We stand in strong solidarity with CNN for the full right to access for our journalists as part of the free and unfettered press. Now, I mean, look, first of all, of course, never trust Fox. But secondly, this was all of us who covered this aggressively a couple of weeks ago. This is why it was important to do that, to put them in a position where they have to pretend that they're doing journalism until it is time for the daily diaper rash of Lou Dobbs to go on a tantrum and authoritarian wish fulfillment. Here's Lou Dobbs talking about, by the way, he's using the word banned as far as I can see.
Wow. Today, the White House blocked the CNN reporter Caitlin Collins from President Trump's trade announcement with the European Union today for shouting what they called inappropriate questions at the president. CNN issued a statement saying in part, quote, this decision to bar a member of the press is retaliatory in nature and not indicative of an open and free press. We demand better. I guess my question would be, who the hell are you? The president does insist on respect. That is, by the way, the White House Press Association is the same one that, of course, made us endure one Michelle Wolf. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says they told Collins another reporter from CNN could join the event, but Collins responded by saying it didn't matter to her because she hadn't planned to be there anyway. Now that's what the White House has to put up with? Are you kidding me? Anyway, all I have to say about that is it's about time there were consequences for disrespectful behavior in the White House.
Solidarity.
Solidarity forever. Thank you, Lou. I don't know if anybody, I'm sure people watching this follow this, but that is like, we debate whether or not what words to use. That is literal fascism, right? Yeah. Like that is like, and by the way, let's be really clear. Okay. She didn't say, hey, you fat asshole, are you embarrassed by Michael Cohen releasing a tape of you while you're speaking incoherently and talking about paying off some woman who, for some godforsaken reason, agreed to have sex with you? That would be disrespectful. She asked a question about one of the main news stories in this country today, okay, which is you on a tape with your counsel talking about paying off a woman you cheated on your wife with. And they asked you that question. So I'm not even going to get into the hypocrisies, obviously, of being on a network that racially smeared Obama and, basically implied that, Hillary Clinton's menopause would bar her from making economic decisions. Okay, let's not even go to those obvious places, because obviously these people are inbuilt hypocrites and incapable of shame or self-assessment on any level. But what that dude is doing with the meaningless phrases about disrespect, and which, as I always say, Lou, if you want disrespect, I got you. I'm happy to
fuck you.
Fuck you. You're a disgusting old racist hack who looks like you're falling apart. not just morally.
And are really probably obviously annoyed that Tucker Carlson's like 20 years younger than you because you are going for that fascist spokesman.
I know. I'm
role.
sorry. He's 20 years younger. He still has twice the chin that you do, though, and he's still going to beat you and take your role. Sorry, Lou. Okay? That's disrespect. I don't respect you or anybody in that White House. What she did was practice journalism, and what you are doing is advocating fascism.
There has to be some form of punishment, people.
It's got to be barred. It's got to be barred. And by the way, Jay, whatever the fuck his name is, the Fox News honcho who's trying to do some good PR, if you're serious about this, maybe it's time to call in your talent and remind them that you're pretending to be a journalistic outfit.
Yeah, suspend Lou Dobbs for saying that.
Yeah, that was pretty messed up. Maybe it's time to suspend Lou. I thought Lou's advocacy of fascism was pretty disrespectful, and I expect consequences. There's some really great people running for Congress. Legit. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is part of a broader efforts across the country. I just interviewed Kaniela Ing. It hasn't been released yet. We're going to probably put it up either today or tomorrow and it'll be unlocked for everybody on the Michael Brooks Show Patreon, also on iTunes. We haven't decided which YouTube channel yet, but it was a great interview. And we covered everything from his proposal for a universal social housing option, which is an excellent parallel for the federal job guarantee, Medicare for all, and postal banking. We talked about his organizing the state legislature against Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg went to Hawaii and tried to kick a bunch of Hawaiians out of their homes so he could build some type of Peter Thiel-style apocalypse bunker. And Kaniela Ing helped stop that from happening. So that's enough. I like that status. And we also then talked about everything, even from Brazil, the coup in Brazil, and how he as a congressman would practice international labor and social democratic solidarity. He's the real deal. He's a great candidate. This is an ad they just put out. It's the same people, I believe, actually, who did Cortez's ads. It's a talented outfit.
Every month, I pay 60% of my income just for rent and student loans. If you're making under $93,000 a year in Hawaii, then you're considered low income. When I was 11, my father passed away. I worked in the pineapple fields to help my mom pay the bills, and later at Walmart and hotels to pay my own. Most of my classmates, my best friends, moved to the mainland, unable to afford life here in Hawaii. We're surrounded by military bases spending trillions of dollars waging for-profit wars, but we have an affordable housing crisis. Our children are moving away, and healthcare is somehow a luxury. It's time for a new era of democratic leadership. My name is Kaniela Ing, and that's why I'm running for Congress. It's easy to blame Republicans, to blame Trump for our problems, but we have to look in the mirror. Who controls our state? Who's controlling our party? The people of Hawaii demand housing for all, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, free college and student debt cancellation now. The majority of people in Hawaii and across the nation support these ideas, but big donors don't. I'm the only candidate in this race who isn't taking corporate money. As a kid, I remember my grandma telling me stories of my ancestors, how they preserved our environment and took care of each other. She told me how our people were exploited by colonizers and forced to work on plantations. The people of Hawaii have come together and risen up before, and we can do it again. If my great-grandparents didn't stand up to the corporate establishment of their time, I would still be on the plantation. It's time for us to stand up, not just to leave a better future for our children or our grandchildren, but to live a better life ourselves. A Hawaii for the many is possible, but no one will give it to us. We have to take it together. Vote Kaniela Saito Ing on August 11th.
He's an amazing candidate. I had a great interview with him. We also talked about Bob Marley and Chronics. And I will add that Ed Case, who is leading the polls, it's an uphill battle. Ed Case is one of the worst Democrats imaginable. Like much worse than Joe Crowley. Like not even like a machine guy, like a right-wing Joe Lieberman style, I believed, lobbied for a union-busting hotel. And in 2006, there was a senator from Hawaii, Daniel Akaka, who was not, he was a liberal, basically, a legit liberal, I think like Kaniela Ing, a native Hawaiian, I think. He served in the Senate, wasn't spectacular, but he had some good, like he voted against the invasion of Iraq. He was a steady voice for labor. Ed Case ran a Senate race against him from the right in 2006 and fortunately lost. But Ed Case is a disaster. I think also related to Steve Case, who's like the AOL guy. So this is a very good versus evil primary there. And Kaniela Ing will be another excellent voice to get into Congress.
Yes. And shout out to the filmmakers. They're called Means of Production. They're a couple of Detroit-based members of the Democratic Socialists of America.
Awesome.
And they also did the ad for AOC. There's a great article about them in Intercept if anyone's interested in learning more.
They're at means_TV on Twitter.
Means_TV. They're doing great
It's
work.
interesting to note the emergence of these sorts of things in parallel with the labor stuff in the UK. Because is it a movement?
Yeah, movement.
They have some sort of momentum. Like their
Yeah.
media operation is they're like 6 months ahead of us, right? Like they had like Brexit, and then we had Trump. Like they're just on a slightly earlier schedule.
It's actually funny because it used to be like with all the third way stuff that like the Blair people came and copied Clinton, and now it's happening with reverse with the actual left wave now.
Maybe we're about to get a Jeremy Corbyn too.
It's time. Go fuck yourselves. I mean, look, Bernie is still like the dude. I'm not like I'm open to critiques of Bernie. I'm totally like whoever the Democratic nominee is, I will support, period. But nobody has given me, I've gotten some compelling critiques of Bernie from people well to the left who definitely do not have a viable Democratic candidate to go against him. And in 2020, if Bernie Sanders runs, if you're in any way serious about any of this stuff, I mean, it's just unfathomable to me that you wouldn't support him in the primary.
Wait, that he wouldn't be left enough, or what are you talking about?
Sorry. I'm saying the only valid criticisms that I hear of Bernie come from people who are well to the left of Bernie, and they do not have. There's no Democratic candidate that's going to run in 2020 that is to the left of Bernie.
Oh yeah.
No, I mean,
so I'm saying like I get not wanting to hero worship the guy, and I get having a critique, but I think even I guess even people trying to posit like AOC against Bernie, it's like no. This is the same politics. And Bernie, like, she worked for Bernie's campaign. Like, Bernie helped make all this happen, and he's still grinding it on everything from, he just introduced a bill to get rid of cash bail, and he just signed the Brazil letter. The dude is good.
Absolutely. I mean, I support him and I critique him at the same time.
Yep.
But I guess I should have said we're going to get an election like the UK recently had.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
I think the popular feeling that would create both those in both places is similar.
Definitely. And Bernie's really, I mean, thank God for Bernie.
The other thing is
that what he did for us in 2016 was so frigging helpful.
The other thing is, if you look at presidential history, if we get Bernie Sanders, he is like the best president from a policy standpoint that we've put in there since maybe like at least Johnson.
And also I don't anticipate Bernie. I mean, I'm sure I'll object to things just structurally and foreign policy, but I don't perceive Bernie getting us into like a mass murder grindhouse war in Asia or the Middle East.
And he has a lot more political capital that is susceptible to being criticized by things that are awful happening done by U.S. empire. So it's he wouldn't be able to stop a lot of it, but it's better him in there than. Oh, one other thing with Canella Ng and AOC, people are trying to read the tea leaves and how radical AOC will be when she's in, right? And the truth is, it really depends on who else is in there with her. Like, if Canella Ng is in there, she's going to be way more radical and have way more room to be radical than if it's just her in there.
And by the way, then, you know who else will be more radical? Barbara Lee.
And
like
the Progressive
the
Caucus,
people
right.
that are already there who have pretty good politics, they're seeing this. And because that was something that Owen Jones said to me when we talked about Corbyn. And I think he was 100% right. He's like, what Corbyn has done to the Labor Party is it's revealed, there's some people in the Labor Party who are really, they're very extremely right-wing. They're Blairites. They have a different right-wing politics. There's other people that don't agree with Corbyn, but they're soft. They're center-left. And he's like, and there's a chunk of people who really just, to be fair to them, their whole formative political lives were defined by the notion that left politics were discredited. And so now they're basically being like, wait, we can actually do this stuff and win? Great. That actually is what I believe. I actually am a socialist. And they're happy. And you'll definitely, if you think of people who've grinded it out in modern democratic politics, including people like Barbara Lee, who've taken some very brave stands, they're going to be very happy to have some serious energy behind them to move in the right direction.
Yeah, Ryan Grimm had a good segment for, is it Rebel HQ? That's the TYT thing.
I think so.
That was saying there's members of the Progressive Caucus that the premise of the piece was that they're not all overjoyed with AOC's success, because a lot of them are like, okay, is she going to challenge me in a primary, or is good? They should be afraid like that. 'Cause
absolutely.
Yeah.
The ones who are good will have, and the ones who've just been coasting, they should have the fear of God in them.
She's already floating a sub-caucus idea for progressives to vote as a bloc, which is wow, imagine
that's that Tea Party shit.
Exactly.
Well, they need to do something like that. They need to do, and that's right, and that's it. I mean, the Progressive Caucus was founded, I believe, by Bernie Sanders in the 90s with a couple, and it was literally just to be there's a handful of us that don't want to totally deregulate Wall Street and gut the social safety net, because that's where politics was at this point. Now it can be much more aggressive. That congressional subcaucus could be well, not just Medicare for all. What about universal housing? What about canceling student loan debts? What about cutting the military budget? I mean, all of that type of stuff. It's great. What did you say?
Be something.
But they need to have a block. I actually think a block like that is kind of the synthesis answer for how to relate to the Democratic Party. I think, because I don't, obviously I think this third party thing is not going to happen at a federal level, but I do think that there does actually need to be some type of distinct power vector that isn't just subsumed, and some type of real distinct block like that might be the ticket.
This is Raphael Khachaturian, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
I think you did it, actually.
David Cleon talking. Cleon said, I know power feels far away from the left, but if Democrats win control of the House and a block of even a dozen or so members, which is, that's optimistic, but or so members of the Democratic caucus have politics of Ocasio or Canella Ng, a scenario that by 2020 seems entirely plausible, we would have enormous leverage.
Enormous leverage.
Raphael says, and an important point, it's not necessarily about pushing the Democrats as a party to the left, but about forming a unified and disciplined voting bloc.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's exactly it.
I think, I was talking about this the other day, I think it would be pretty badass if a lot of these real progressive folks switched their affiliation to independent once they were beloved incumbents like Bernie did.
Bernie actually was independent the whole time. He's a total anomaly.
Or like Bernie did from the beginning, I should say.
Total anomaly.
He's not even a Democrat, because there really is a need for an independent. I don't know if it's a party or if it's a movement, but we need some class independence from capitalist political parties. And I don't think we're there yet where we can have a third party. I think that's going to be a really long time before there's any kind of labor or Democratic Socialist Party in America that could run and win on anything but the very local level. But that said, it's something to keep in mind. And we have seen over and over again throughout history the way the Democratic Party attempts to co-opt these left populist movements. I mean, I saw it the other day at Ozzy Fest when Tom Perez tried to take the credit for Ocasio-Cortez. So it's just it's something.
A lot of balls on. Like, I think the DSA should, and people involved in DSA should be very, honest and clear about their major role in that happening, and also totally that like our revolution and Justice Democrats were essential in making that happen. But it's like that was a progressive Democratic Socialist win. Like Tom Perez getting in on that is amazing.
He calls her Alexandria like he knows her.
Yeah, get the fuck
And
out
I think
of
it's
here.
important to flag how unpersuasive that is. I also
Yes.
think it's that is an inevitable byproduct of the project.
That is the inevitable byproduct of success, right? That's true.
They're going to try and co-opt it, and we can't let them.
I would also, and it's funny for me, like I'll really reiterate though how in some ways like really profoundly I just don't have the emotional attachment to any of these party label questions, period, to the point where I could be persuaded, honestly, in a pure Republican district that somebody who's like, I'm going to run as a DSA candidate in a Republican primary.
Love that.
Like I would,
DSA,
cool, do it. Like I have no, awesome. Like if you have a strategy and you're like, I'm not going to compromise on like I'm literally running that same ad, except it will be in the Republican primary. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like if that's easier, if that is a lower barrier to entry because you're in a one-party state, cool.
And I think
that will throw some monkey wrenches there too. I think that's great.
I should ask some of my Red River Valley DSA people what they think about that sort of approach in North Dakota. But that's what happened in North Dakota 100 years ago. There was a nonpartisan league. They said we're going to run in both sides.
Right.
And it just so happened that at that point, the Democrats were less controlled by capital, basically, because the Republicans were like the railroad party. And that's how it worked out. But you take all these things are on-ramps.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. Ryan, chat. So Roland Martin does a video downplaying AOC. I like him on some issues, but he's the ultimate shield for corporate Dems. Wow, that's a lot. If you look at the comments on his YouTube video, literally every single comment is telling him he's wrong. He has a tendency to think he speaks for all the black community. He constantly pushes anti-progressive messages and would not invite progressives on his show. He's had black Republicans on before he would get a black progressive. I mean, I don't know much about Roland Martin. I've seen him do some appearances, and I think he's a super talented, entertaining broadcaster. I've never gotten the impression that his politics are all that amazing.
If that's an accurate representation of his strategy, he's probably not going to be very successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, getting back to the Tom Perez thing, like, you got to start thinking about your market, buddy. There's some very cynical reasons for getting righteous right now. Black Marxist, thanks for dunking on centrists like Tom Watson. Our biggest threat today. Doorbots, I don't agree with this. Doorbots and IDW are annoying, but will fade. Have you seen them attack Halper and Brejoy as white adjacent sellouts? Need a progressive person of color nominee in 2020 to avoid this attack. Well, actually, I don't agree. I'm not going to play the game on that level. I'm not doing that. That is actually where I draw a really strong line at identity politics. I'm like, and also, I mean, if you want to, and it's funny, like, I'm not going to play this game, but like being the first, actually, the best thing about Bernie Sanders becoming president would be the fact, and this would be the only reason I'd still want him alive, Joe Lieberman dealing with the fact that it wasn't he that was the first Jewish president, but Bernie Sanders would be amazing.
So good.
Yeah, that would be really fun. But look, I'm not going to play that game. I have seen them attack Bree and Katie Halper that way. That's what they do. They're totally cynical. They take really serious issues of racism and sexism and those things and, harness them for the most cynical, petty, trivial ends. And of course, even if they were, like, again, I think voting purely based on just identity identification is stupid and I reject it categorically. But if they were doing that, then they should be out full bore for Cynthia Nixon, a lesbian woman who's running for governor of New York, but most of these idiots have endorsed Andrew Cuomo.
No, she's white adjacent, white male adjacent.
Yeah, she's white male. I mean, they're idiots. They're disingenuous. They're morons. They're cultists. I actually don't think they're as important as you think they are. I think that the actual raw funding, right? Like the money is important. These people's social and intellectual capital is totally depreciated. And once you're dealing with just money, that's a much more raw and direct fight. But I think the broader cultural buy-in, like nobody knows who Tom Watson is. They don't care. They are interested in who someone like Bree is. They are tuning in to shows like this all over the place. Random Hillary dead enders on Twitter are not in the culture.
At Horse Whisperer,
Yeah,
this one.
like,
Oh
yeah,
my
please
God.
get out of here.
And not for nothing,
yeah.
like a lot of these left populist candidates are women and they are people of color.
Of course they are.
So many of them.
Of course they are. Because it's there's no because to
and people in the not to mention people in the movement that they came out of.
Well, as Adolf Reed always says, what is the organization in the country that represents the most transgender people and the most women of color?
AFL-CIO, baby.
There you go. Exactly. I disagree with you. I think the dark web is actually facilitating a new renaissance of soft racism and sexism in the country, and they do matter. And if Doorbots fuck up the margins on an electoral strategy, that matters too.
I think the IDW is going to be here at least as long as MAGA is.
I anticipate fighting the IDW for most of my professional life, sadly. Let's see. Adam from LA. Hey, Michael, I was hoping I could use IM to reach out to the guy who called in about Owen Benjamin. I was working on the story, and I have some info on this already. Can I email the MR inbox? Love the show, mainly TMBS. Well, that's a good IM right there.
What was his did he give his contact info?
You can email us at majorityreporters@gmail.com. But I don't know how to put you in touch with the gentleman that called.
Yeah, give us yours.
Yeah, give us yours and tell us who you're working on a story. If you're a journalist, give us your social media info and stuff like that. Attorney Andrew, blah. Could you have someone on that takes an agnostic stance towards Russiagate? Could probably do it on TMBS. I did with Matt Taibbi.
It just turns out that it's not quite as agnostic as some people would like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, okay, Sam Sachs comes to mind as someone who's been critical of the recent Ryan Cooper and David Cleon piece, and Corey Robin also comes to mind. I just want to see an argument, really. Well, I don't think those guys aren't agnostic. They're on the anti-Russia story side of it, and that's fine, but they're not agnostic.
By agnostic, do you mean reported and not a take? Or what does agnostic mean?
Does it mean that they're not yet decided whether it's a real thing that happened or a deep state conspiracy against
I don't
Trump?
know. It sounds to me like he's basically means people who still don't take the story seriously. So I don't. Oh, he said, okay, my bad. I misread you. Antagonistic to the Russia story. Maybe. I might have Corey Robin on TMBS because I would want to talk to him about several things. I talked to Taibbi about it because Taibbi was, obviously knows Russia really well. I talk about with Alona.
The way
I really don't have such a deep interest in that story, to be honest with you. I think in some ways, I think it might be really bad. I think Marcy Reeler might be totally right, and in which case, it's gonna come out. This is all just speculation.
And, reacting to the information that's released to us on obvious schedules that we don't know about.
Right.
It's just a fool's game. It's occasionally interesting. I like to hear, audio from inside the White House, obviously, but
obviously.
But following this closely it's just not that big a thing. But it's interesting, even the Taibbi thing, people cannot hear any. He wasn't that skeptical of sort of the what we often say about the Russia story.
No,
it's just sort of the people overreacting jingoism, which is a concern, and it's especially a concern I think for guys like him and Greenwald, who every single time that they try to make some sort of principal point, and maybe we shouldn't bring Greenwald in, but they get attacked by all this stuff, you're an agent, you're a spy, you're insane.
If you are
saying
Taibbi literally prefaced he's been bombarded with attacks before we talked about the 90s in Russia, and I want to make people need to understand the difference. Whataboutism is bringing up a trivial pedantry to obscure a current conversation or trying to score a side point that isn't the relevant part of what you're discussing. There is no conversation you can have about the modern relationship with Russia that does not include what we did to them in the 1990s. Period. And that's not in any way exculpatory of Putin's government. I have no romanticization or justification. I think Russia is a right-wing petrostate that pursues a very ugly foreign policy. I've said it multiple times. In the 1990s, heading through the last couple of years even, I mean, NATO expansion, and we went in there and did a brutal, vicious shock therapy that seriously, that reduced life expectancy. And also in 1996 helped engineer a campaign to keep Yeltsin in office so the country can continue being privatized. And that privatization process generated everything from this very aggrieved nationalism, which has been channeled into this reactionary right-wing politics, and also generated a huge amount of poverty back then, and also created the oligarch class that everybody now is so worried about. So Taibbi talking about that is not like, oh, well, what that happened in 96, so whatever, they can do what they want now. It's literally explaining what has happened. And if you can't understand that difference, then you should just take a break. Go watch some sports, because you're not thinking. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, judging from the talks I saw at Ozzy Fest over the weekend, the Radical Center has a pretty narrow understanding of the Russia story, and they need to, because otherwise the implications would spread much further out than simply Donald Trump.
Then it would be an oligarch story, and all of a sudden, if it's an oligarch story, ooh, that doesn't look good for the whole modern political class, does it?
It's I won't bring it up again, but there's that Orwell quote that I always mention where it said the sort of liberals, they, in order to come to terms with fascism, need to understand socialism, but most of them can't, so they'll just descend into idiocy.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That captures a lot. Oh, on Jamie's point about certain substances causing you to question your atheism, can you imagine Sam Harrison's psychedelics? He would vacillate between crying panic and super fucking boring.
Psychedelics are brain tools. They're brain technology. They're only as good as the hands that they're in.
He must have had a bad trip when one of his Quran audiobooks was playing or something like that.
I don't know. I am so the fact that we share a Vipassana meditation teacher, as far as I understand, and the fact that he's done all this, it's such a bummer. It really, but I have an integral view. I think all of these things are really good, but none of them will solve the problem by themselves.
Yeah, it can be used for good or for bad, right?
Right.
Like you meditate, you get into Buddhism, and some people use it as a tool to understand the fellowship of humanity, and other people use it to excuse themselves for being selfish assholes.
Or other people use it to take a radical misunderstanding of the very sophisticated Buddhist teachings on intentionality to be like, when Dick Cheney does it, it's with good intentions. When Bin Laden does it, it's with bad intentions. So therefore, you don't need to analyze anything in history or policy. And if you say otherwise, you're either taking me out of context or I'm going to have a tantrum. Release the emails. That should be another Sam Harris thing. Is hashtag release the emails. Sam does the Dougie. Everybody love it. Everybody love. Wow, that's a real deep cut there, dude. Okay, let's do one more clip because I like this guy. I like Mehdi Hassan, and yeah, he basically does a good job of. I mean, Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It's not just. Of course, they're racist. And let's be real. And I have this new term that I'm like, in the same way, by the way, Sam Harris is functionally racist. And what I mean by functionally racist is I actually would accept, I think that it might actually be a fairly small part of the population that literally wakes up and is like, I'm a Klansman. I'm David Duke or Richard Spencer or whatever. But if you are either promoting bigotry because of electoral gain, or promoting pseudoscience to, inflame your base or soothe whatever emotions you have, you are functionally contributing to racism. And this clip is good because it just gets rid of a lot of the essentially just, best friends are black type spin. Here's Mehdi Hassan with Trump advisor. I love how Trump has advisors I've never even heard of. J.D. Gordon. I have no idea who the hell this guy is, but he'll probably end up in some like Cyprus bank account story or something. Here he is.
Isn't another problem of working on foreign policy with a man like Donald Trump is that he doesn't like foreigners. He's kind of racist.
He married some.
He's racist.
No, I would disagree with that. And he does like foreigners. Melania is from Slovenia.
Okay. Sorry.
Nice.
You're right.
You said he likes Vladimir Putin.
You're right. He likes white foreigners. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, let me ask you this. Because Mark's getting upset, and we'll come to Mark in a moment. When he compares Syrian refugees to snakes, says everyone from Haiti has AIDS, calls African countries S-hole countries, accuses Mexico of sending over rapists and drug dealers, calls immigrants invaders who are infesting the United States, blames terrorist attacks on the Muslim mayor of London, retweets white nationalists, praises neo-Nazis as very fine people, singles out black athletes for abuse, attacks a Hispanic judge as Mexican. None of that's racist.
Well, I would tell you that he did the sword dance, as you said, with the Saudi leadership, Saudi king, right?
That's your response to what I just read out? That he danced with the Saudis?
Let me get to that point. He also said nice things about Kim Jong-un just now. So how could he be racist against foreigners who are not white? So you basically just made an argument.
I just explained how he can be racist. How do you defend?
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you share the views that I just read out?
No, I don't.
Why do you think he said those things?
I think President Trump says whatever he wants to say.
That doesn't not make him a racist. Sorry to break that to you.
No, I don't think he's a racist whatsoever.
Do you think the comment? Okay. Do you think the comments he made are legitimately perceived as racist?
I think he makes comments that he probably shouldn't make. I wouldn't make them, certainly.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why shouldn't he make them? Because they're racist.
Yes, but Mehdi Hassan's a Muslim. So let's do a thought experiment about his intentions behind this segment. What I like the guy is just like, wait a second. If somebody is potentially from North Asia or the Middle East, an autocrat who's worth billions of dollars, that might be enough to remove his innate dislike of other people based off of their skin color.
I mean, and let's remember he called Charles Murray the most unfairly maligned man of his lifetime. And let's look at the word racism and strip it of any sort of morality, right? And just look at it as like logic robots that we are.
Oh yeah.
Racist. What would a racist thing be? Is like if you overgeneralize based on race in a way that is not
harmful and detrimental to the group.
Or even for understanding of reality.
Or even for just understanding of reality.
Like, it's incorrect.
Oh my God! You know what just happened? This is a big deal. Matt Leck just owned Sam Harris with facts and logic.
It doesn't matter if you feel racist in your heart or not, Sam. It's what you're doing.
Right.
And the lines that you're sort of creating content on.
Precisely. And it was so funny. I tweeted last night because I was like, how long until there's like a thought experiment about apartheid being necessary or potentially justified by Harris? And I don't know if he'll go that far. But of course, somebody immediately hit me with like, it's already happening on his Reddit threads. And it was this like total Harris bot being like, what are the implications of blacks having lower cognitive abilities for how we organize complex societies? Here's an interesting perspective from South Africa.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's like, exactly. And because, ironically, because all of you fucking idiots who are constantly of course, when you're dealing with policy or the Middle East or anything, obviously knowing something about history or policy or how the world works, that's obviously totally irrelevant, and ideas are the most important. But conversely, when you're just recklessly promoting some of the most dangerous, harmful ideas on the planet, then it's just, that's just for play.
And let's say
we shouldn't, obviously, because that's another game they play. Like, oh, it doesn't really mean, like, this isn't anything you do anything with. It's just to know.
Yeah, like let's say you actually thought you should be this pathfinder through dangerous, historically fraught ideas. Maybe a bit of sensitivity and also lack of sensitivity, like a hard shell that happens when somebody is like, "Hey, wait a second, there's a lineage here that is pretty troubling." And even if you're right, which is not, but even if you're right here, maybe you should be a bit sensitive to like people's deeply historically founded concerns about a lot of this stuff.
No, because it's unfair. And I've been maligned, and Ezra Klein's the moral equivalent of the KKK.
Yeah.
Signed
Oh my God. If that's your mission in life, right? If that's your specific area of inquiry for your whole career, and you're like, oh, why are you interested in race science? No reason. Like, pretty sus.
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
And if they cared about history at all, they would look to the history of race and racism and where that comes from. And the racism, the racism that we have in America now, you can draw a direct line to this system of belief that was put in place to justify slavery, aka making money off of the free stolen labor of African slaves.
Spelling that out sounds somewhat invidious, and we don't really have time to clean up the mess.
Well, but the point is, and this is why it has real deep implications, is that those guys want to eliminate history as a discipline. What?
Yeah, it's ahistorical materialism.
It's just
in his case, it's not even materialism because he literally it's actually Hegelian idealism because he literally privileges, like Steve Pinker might be ahistorical materialism. Sam Harris literally runs around being like, ideas drive
It's the
history.
scripture.
Like literally, like on one
He's
hand,
not a pseudoscience guy.
he is a pseudoscience guy, but he doesn't even know how to do that properly.
Because like
The guy privileges ideas, literally disembodied ideas over actual events, and then goes out around yakking about it. And I'm the fucking woo-woo agnostic, maybe your spiritual realities, man. But when I analyze politics, I'm like, okay, what happened? Who, what, where, when, and how? There was some rebel group in Afghanistan didn't flip sides in a civil in terms of whether they're aligned with the ISI or the Taliban or the United States because they did like a different scriptural interpretation. It was because of like who gave them the latest fleet of Toyota trucks. That's how the world works, you fucking morons. Brendan.
Yeah, so this whole Sam Harris thing, I didn't know about him until I started working on this show, and you guys dragged me into this hell.
I'm sorry.
But so I went down to visit the beach in New Jersey, where I was living down there to work on a project for a network last year.
Right.
And I lived in an interesting living situation, renting out this guy's master bedroom in his house with his wife. And
This sounds like a very interesting of a Penthouse
pretty
Forum
cool.
story right now.
But
I thought I was just working on a cable show.
But it turned out I was on another cable show after dark.
And that's how Brendan got into a poly triad.
Yeah.
No, but this guy...
It's called Cuck My Wife. We're pitching it.
He was a really nice guy, very, like, interesting, smart, like, autodidact type who had, like, some master's degrees and other things, was a bit of a futurist. And, and I didn't put the signs together, but I visited him again. Now that I'm, like, immersed in this world, I was like, oh, Chris, let's talk about it, because you whined about... His name's not Chris, by the way. That's another name.
Very well done. Pro, Brendan.
So we were talking, and he's like, yeah, so two of my boys like got in a big fight. And I was like, are you talking about Ezra Klein and Sam Harris? He's like, yeah, it was rough. And I was like, dude, he's like kind of racist. And he's like, no, dude, he's not racist because he's using like the facts and logic. And I was like, dude, basically we're privileging that over, like, it's obfuscating any sorts of like racism for these people. And it's just like, it's very hard to move past that for some people, and it's very hard to have that conversation.
Well, this is also what, but again, this is also
that
why
hierarchy of
I hated.
ideas.
I don't even accept that, right? Like, I don't even accept.
Of course not.
Right? I don't even accept. I'm not even going to concede the ground. But it's like this is what right out of the gate. As soon as I started like being on air in like 2013, and I did these Islam segments, it wasn't just that I was offended and disturbed by how disastrously stupid and bigoted and dangerous those ideas were. It's like, oh, this thought pattern is going to become racism. It's going to become because if you just say, here's the world as it is, I don't need to know anything about it, but I have a prejudice, I have a stat, and I have a thought experiment. Well, dude, I mean, I could create a logic and fact-based system that says that, like, I mean, I was going to say Jews are superior, but people do that. I mean, you can basically
Scientific data can't be racist.
Yeah, scientific data is always like, unless you're talking 2 + 2 = 4. If you don't understand that scientific data is contextual, particularly when you're talking about something as hard to figure out as intelligence.
Well, especially if you know how flimsy race is as a sort of
Right.
how shallow it is. It's like saying, like, let's say I'm looking at somebody's hair to determine. It's like him saying like scientific data can't be hair science or something like that. Like it.
Right. I mean, but it's also what happened. Like we were talking about this with Marisa Baradaran, and she was like, and what was amazing, like these people always say like, I'm open to the argument, convince me otherwise. And it's like, you're not. Because all of these books, even if you fixate on the fact that we like to make fun of these people and enjoy ourselves, and that makes you triggered, every single segment has taken on the merits of these tests, the historical realities of these policies, the history, everything you need. And if you are unable because you lack the intellectual capacity or you're too emotionally invested to understand it, that's on you. But the arguments were made. I didn't just come out and say, Sam Harris talks like a whiny little bitch, has a Golden Girls trust fund, and is a bigot. All those things are true. But I said a lot of things in between.
When people watch cable news, are they getting informed or are they buying the illusion that they're getting informed? And it's the same thing with rationality and the intellectual dark web.
I actually went to an interesting talk on gender and capitalism at the Socialism Conference recently. And I'd always kind of accepted that sex is the biological reality and gender is the social construct. But even sex, even the science that went into determining, the differences between men and women, that is incredibly biased as well. And there's a lot of junk in there. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it makes sense. So when you see like pop sci books like, men are from Mars, women are from Venus or whatever, it's like, yeah, you gotta take that with a grain of salt, folks.
That'll keep the testosterone flowing.
Oh, and the person doing the talk was Lichi D'Amelio, I should say. She's a really rad socialist feminist writer. Yeah.
Matt and I are working on a book called We're from Mars, Other Men Are Bitches. The TNBS
I'm working on a book called Send Elon Musk to Mars Without Oxygen.
Oh my God. We were watching, I was watching Total Recall over the weekend, and there's that scene where no spoilers, the lady's like kicking this guy's ass because she's like, I hate this fucking planet. I can't believe you brought me to Mars. She's like mad at Arnold. And I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be Elon Musk and Grimes someday. Just want to clip that
Arnold's a lot cooler than Elon Musk.
Absolutely.
You're calling from a 917 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's me.
It's you.
Hi, is this me?
Yeah, it's you.
Hello? Yeah, hi.
Hey, what's up?
This is Jake the Teaser. I'm calling from New York.
Hey, Jake.
And I want to talk about the Randi Weingarten.
Okay.
So I just caught like the last 20 minutes or so, but she really changed her tune. I was one of the teachers. There was many teachers that were, kind of upset about the endorsement. And
right.
I think that when Sam asked that question last, I think maybe she didn't want to talk after that so much.
No, I don't think so. They talked for like 45 minutes. They had a good interview. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I missed the beginning, but it was a weird note because she was really saying stuff that is a little dicey. I mean, she's talking great stuff now. She's saying corporate Democrats are just as to blame, as Republicans for the privatization and the ed reform. But I mean, we can't unsee.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question though? And just I mean, obviously, I do have a bit of a bias in this question, but I'm really just curious because you would obviously know better than us. But I don't know if you heard right after the interview, because even someone like I'm not, none of us here specialize in education issues specifically, but obviously just working this job, I have a sense of it. And I also, was like, oh, that's a shame that, they should be endorsing Bernie. I mean, every union should be endorsing Bernie. That's a no-brainer, right? But I guess it's like, it strikes me that I don't think that she's in any way like an ill-intentioned person. And it just seems that I don't view it as dicey. I view it as her responding to a changing political environment and going in the right direction. And that's a win, right?
Now, right. But, she's also going to, be reelected like in a year or two. And, what happened. I mean, for her to talk about corporate Democrats like it wasn't like she wasn't dealing with them. I mean,
well, she has to deal with them.
We know that.
I mean, but shouldn't we also be real about that, right? Like, I mean, I think people, again, it's like a couple years ago that, I would imagine that they would, especially, there's two interpretations you could have politically out of Obama. You could say, and let's also remind ourselves, pre-Bernie, these people were, and I think she acknowledged it, that she didn't have a full read of the anger and realities on the ground. But say you go through Obama, the Obama administration is terrible on these issues. Attacking teachers, totally bought into the, neoliberal test, blah, 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 all of that nonsense. And so you think to yourself, Hillary's going to win. There's nobody, and this is a mistake. They didn't have their ear to the ground, but whatever. It's a mistake that almost everybody made. And they think to themselves, do we either make a protest about her? We don't even know what the alternative is. Or should we try to get in at the ground floor here and try to make sure that we don't have another administration that attacks us the same way? And as she pointed out, some of that did achieve some effects of Hillary walking back some of those things. And so I would imagine now, a year or two later,
she didn't walk it back. She got booed.
Right.
It was at the teacher union. It was at her coronation where she mentioned charter schools and she got booed.
Right.
And that's what I mean. It was the rank and file, literally. And if Randy would have said, "Look," if Randy would have said, "Look, guys, I have to do this through the executive committee. I'm going to call in all my chips, and I'm really doing this," that would have been one thing. But she tried to play it off like she was talking to the teachers, and she was polling the teachers, and she was, really interacting. And that's kind of what she was saying now, which does not smack true, because anybody can go online right now on the AFT Facebook and see thousands of comments after they did the early endorsement, including Hillary supporters, that did not, the process was rigged.
Well, maybe now, well, then you guys got to focus moving forward on holding her accountable to her current rhetoric. And if she doesn't, then you got to, who's the woman in Massachusetts? I forget her name. She's great. She's talking about, do you know what I'm talking about?
Is she elected official?
I forget her title. I know we had her on the show several years ago. She was just interviewed in the Jacobin, and she's totally was back on board with the teacher strikes, and I believe talking about what was happening in Chicago several years ago. And of course, people should always remind themselves that the teacher strikes, which are vital now and increasing, the precursor was Chicago teacher strikes in 2012 or 13, and that was totally in light of what Obama and Duncan were doing. So I hear you, and I think there's an opening now, and I think she's moving in the right direction. And I also think if she doesn't do what she is setting out to do, then the American Federation of Teachers needs a new leader. Appreciate the call, man.
Right. Well, it's not as easy as that.
Well,
the way those elections work.
Nothing as easy as that. But you see my point, right? Like I hear what you're saying.
If I could just say one last thing.
Sure.
She was in the meetings, in the backroom meetings with John Podesta, Ann O'Leary, Neera Tanden, and those were the people that she needed to stand up to and say, "Sorry, but you guys are raising money with Jeb Bush. You're raising money with all these corporate reformers." And and they were the ones that she accepted.
Yeah, I see. I say I think that was the context then, but I think she can. We have to just see.
Well, this energy it needs to come from the bottom up, right? And I don't want to let her off the hook for endorsing Hillary or making the political calculations, but it comes from the bottom up. And when it's the same thing as unions when they endorse Cuomo. say, over his progressive challenger. They know that Governor Cuomo is a vindictive asshole, and they think he's going to win. And if he wins and they didn't endorse him, he's going to punish them. Whereas if a more progressive person wins somehow, they will not be punished. So we need to create the conditions by which it becomes to leaders' advantage to do the more progressive and populist thing.
And it's hard for us to comment, not knowing the specifics of like how that vote's gonna go, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and I also, even there, like I got to tell you really bluntly, and you would know better than me. And I just think like I would focus the energy you have about what happened in the past on what to do with her in the future.
yeah, beat her in an election. That'd be fine.
Yeah, but my guess with Randi Weingarten is that she's the type of person who has decent politics and has been totally. I think we got to remind ourselves, and I'm not excusing it, but if you're even in your 40s, let alone 50, 60 something years old, and you've been part of like the liberal wing of the Democratic coalition, you've been having your ass kicked since the 80s across the board. I mean, even starting with Carter in the 70s, right? I don't think she was in those meetings going, this is great. How can we bundle with Jeb donors? She's in those meetings going, guys, if I get you the votes, if we do this early, can you slightly less fuck my people? And that's horrible. But that's a structural issue.
Yeah.
And now we're in a position where we don't have to play those same games. And she seems to be responding to that. If she doesn't, and I know it's hard, I have no comment on how I'm not in the AFT. I'm sure it's hard. But the same frustrations you have now has got to be put into holding her accountable to her word now. Or if not, yeah, it's hard. But then you got to get her out.
Well, unions
right?
are hypothetically more democratic than, say, the United States of America. So I have a little bit of hope. But, it speaks to the limits of established unions in general. It's a structural issue.
I mean, even just democracy in general.
They've been
right?
completely
right.
Like there's people included in that you don't agree with and are your enemies. And if you lose, say, an election, then you just work on like making the conditions so you can win the next one.
But I really would, in general, I don't know. Maybe it's presumptuous for me to say you lived it, you dealt with it. But I just think like this constant relitigation of things that have already happened. It's like, guys, we're here. I mean,
I like bringing them up.
I don't know
Things that happened and then comparing them with what's going on currently as to show like this is a lag and indicator, but it's an indicator that's moving is worthwhile.
Right.
If you dredge up the past to say this is all worthless, that's just a destructive, unproductive use of history.
Of course, but that doesn't mean we can't take lessons from history.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's what he said. Yeah. No, of course. I mean, I'm not. I think the biggest deficit we have, arguably in my view, is that we don't think historically. But I think specific micro relitigate, like, I'll give you even a more extreme one. This guy Richard Ojeda, who's running in West Virginia, I hope he wins. I think it's great that he's running in that district. I think it's great that he supported the teacher strikes. I think it's great he's talking about, expanding universal health care and medical marijuana. And, he was one of those guys who was scammed by Trump on job issues. So he supported Trump in 2016. And there's probably plenty of other issues that I fundamentally disagree with him on. But if he wants to flip a Republican district to a populist Democrat running on those issues, awesome. I'm not fixated on who he voted for in 2016. And if I could do that for somebody who, went for Trump, I could certainly do that for somebody who was the wrong way in the Democratic primary. That's really my point. You're calling from a 904 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey there. Is this me?
Yep.
Oh, cool. 1 second. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Go ahead.
Okay, I was on headset, so I wasn't sure. First time caller. Been listening for a couple months.
Hey, thanks.
Troy from Jacksonville, Florida.
Hey, Troy, what's going on? Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Been enjoying your content, all this, all that. Trying to get more engaged in politics and whatnot.
Cool.
I went to a city hall up in Jacksonville, trying to listen to the issues there, and crap is crazy boring. I don't know how people can consistently be engaged with that.
Okay.
Well, it's like
I hear you.
They're like voting on 2008 564. All yay, all yay. Blah,
Well,
blah, 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 blah.
maybe you ought to,
Or
is there a DSA meeting any place by you, or a Our Revolution, or Justice Democrats? Maybe you should look.
There's a There's a DSA in the area. I called them. I was trying to go to one of their events, but it was on the day that I was working. Either way, so trying to do that more. Also, I was trying to be more like doing my research before voting happens here in August.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out how the heck people determine which judges they're going to vote for, because they can't put any politics on their stuff. So it seems like the only information I have to go on is like identity politics stuff, like, am I voting for the black guy, or am I voting for the white lady, or am I voting for this?
Can I tell you something? Can I tell you something?
I do that.
Yeah. I have such a critique of that, of identity politics voting in the way it's deployed. Judgeships are so hard to figure out, and I'm not going to lie to you. Yes, I'm like Democratic black chick. Check.
The other.
That's literally how I vote.
That's other simple. I'm working with here.
I'm just like.
I'm like, okay, well, I don't want
process.
Rick Scott, so that makes it easy.
Well, there you go.
The other simple trick with judgeships is if they say, "I'm tough on crime," don't vote.
Oh yeah,
for that
if
person.
somebody says that they're tough on crime from any background or party on their campaign literature, you vote against them.
Yeah,
that is a very
dog
easy
whistle for
message.
sure.
Yes, if you're running for a judgeship on a tough on crime or public safety platform, you're never going to get my vote. But I'm not going to lie to you. I have been and it's really, especially like in Brooklyn, because there's like really bad machine politicians. But I have sat there and looked at like circuit judge for whatever, and I'm just like, black chick.
Oh, the white guy.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
I'm just like
two white guys who've both been in there for 13 and 14 years, and I'm like, I have no idea what their politics are. And I tried calling their aides, and they're like, oh, we can't discuss specific policies or anything. I'm like, then what the hell are you for?
Yeah, they're for providing a check on mob rule, right? I guess it's different when you vote for a judge, but like, this is why I dislike the judiciary branch of government in general. Because, yeah, they go in there pretending they have no politics, and everyone has to pretend that it's just about like, oh, yeah, he really knows the law, or he's like really just a sage interpreter of the Constitution, when everybody knows that these people have politics, and they're going to decide based on their politics and then find some legalistic justification after the fact for it. And that's how it's been for a pretty long time.
True story. Check out a DSA meeting, Troy. Thanks for calling, man. Brendan.
Elon Musk is actually working on a device that would take out judges' ability to have politics in their rulings.
Yeah. What if judges didn't have politics in their ruling? What if they just naturally, through scientific process, banned unions?
You were hiding in the.
You're
like
calling
a brain implant?
You're calling from a 306 area code. Are you there? Oh, I think, okay. Sorry. He's doing something else. You're calling from a 208 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, well, I'm typically in Boise, Idaho, but I'm on vacation in Astoria, Oregon. Anyway, it was actually kind of funny because I was gonna sort of say a joke about the whole judicial thing. I was gonna say that there would be some kind of magical algorithm, and then supposedly Elon Musk is sort of unironically doing that.
No, I think Brendan was joking.
Yeah.
Hey, don't put anything past Elon Musk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's so many things to talk about.
Pick one and go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So I was kind of thinking. I think one problem that sort of progressives have in like Democratic primaries is that a lot of the corporate Democrats have a lot more ability to shape perception.
What makes you say that?
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just curious what makes you say that, because I don't think that that's true right now at all.
Okay. Well, like personally in Idaho, like a lot of when it was the Paulette Jordan versus AJ Blukoff race, there were all of the sort of state Democrats were pouring in to support AJ Belukoff. And everyone I kind of talked to were like, yeah, this is the only guy who can possibly win, even though Belukoff ran like in 2014 and he lost. I also kind of saw the same thing in the 2016 primary with Clinton and Bernie. Like there are sort of a lot of people before even like the Iowa primary saying that like Bernie's like run was essentially over.
Yep.
I don't know.
I think that that's changing a lot now. It's definitely been the case.
And I think it might just butt in. It might be interesting in like a rural area if that's more pronounced, if the corporate sort of control over communications, which I think is probably true, right? Sinclair markets and that sort of shit.
Sure. I think though that, I mean, I guess to me, like every question that involves that kind of internal democratic battle, it's just like, just got to keep doing it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing. It's like, it's like trench warfare. You just keep going. I mean, we can refine what we do, but that's it. Yeah. And of course, those people are always going to, like, sometimes I do think that I'm not saying you're doing this, but some people have this, like, weird expectation on the other hand that, like one day Tom Perez is just going to get up and be like, you're right. I'm sorry. I suck. Like, no, like these guys, like, they have power. They have donation bases. They're going to keep, this is their careers. Like they're going to try to preserve their position. And our job across the board is to defeat them or other times make tactical alliances with some of them or convert them. That's it. And I think you're probably right that at a rural area, you're probably right in terms of the media filter. But the advantage that people on the left have is actual grassroots organizing. Like my friend Luke Mayville has done an amazing job with Expand Care in Idaho with like the Medicaid ballot initiative, right? And he's like, he goes door to door. And I mean, he's like, well, but he's like, look, across the board, people are very into Medicaid. It doesn't matter what, right wing, whatever. So there you go. That's the advantage that we have.
And not to mention, we also have the advantage that there are more of us.
Right.
And we have the power to shut things down if we want to, if we decide to. Like, it's not only about electing the right people, whether they're trying to reform the Democratic Party or sort of just use the ballot line parasitically, like a host uses a shell of a creature, It's about, it's about mass action. Like we didn't get rent stabilization laws in New York City by voting for the right people. We got them through massive rent strikes and tenant organizing. So they're both important. They
remember
really
the
are,
FDR, the FDR quote. I think it's actually a real one to the labor union leader. Came and gave him some rap about some important labor initiative, and of course, like FDR, to his real everlasting credit, really was like an actual social democratic pro-union president. And FDR said, I agree with you. I think you're totally right. Now go make me do it. Literally, it was like, all right, now you got to go do it.
But also, like the way FDR was able to get the ruling class on board with a lot of this stuff is he framed it as a compromise to preserve capitalism,
in
to
the
preserve
very
their
beginning.
position
By not too far into the New Deal, there were literally people like plotting an armed fascist coup against him.
Yeah,
so
they
that
were.
the dynamics really
and
changed.
they've been plotting their comeback ever since that happened.
That's
so
the truth.
When we
That
tell
is the truth.
Meghan McCain we can do it the nice way, the Bernie Sanders way, or the not so nice way, we're being real.
I will say in any scenario for Meghan McCain, not nice way. Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. All right, we're done for calls for the day. We're going to do a few IMs. Blank. I'm sorry, man. I don't have time to get into that because that's when you send links, it makes it a bit harder. Counter the argument that Trump is helping poor because African American and Hispanic unemployment is decreasing rapidly! ! Well, we can counter it by the fact that poverty is increasing rapidly, and programs that are the vital parts of an already threadbare social safety net are being slashed.
here's the trend line on those
right
those two things. You notice that it's been going down in a basically steady pace since Obama was in office in the Great Recession, which means that whenever somebody says that about Donald Trump being great for blacks and Latinos because unemployment's so low, what they're really saying is Trump should get credit for not reversing this long-term trend.
Yeah, and not to mention, just because unemployment is going down doesn't mean that people have enough to live on. Like,
Right.
I think
Of
Lee Carter
course.
maybe said it on your
He
show,
did.
and he's like, we
Brilliant.
don't need more jobs. We need better jobs.
Better jobs and more money,
More
and more
wages,
time, and
benefits.
more and power over your own, economic democracy. Exactly. All right, Tomcat. Hi guys. Regarding the plane video yesterday, I can only apologize for that English prick who tried to intimidate that brave girl. As most Europeans know, British are the worst. Are the worst tourists, and what that guy tried to do with her and her phone as he stood up is low even for the Brexiteer fuckboys. Corbyn and the regress. Also, the insufferable Majid Nawaz is at it again with Corbyn and the quote-unquote regressive left, from repeating British mainstream media claims about Labour's anti-Semitism to ragging on Owen Jones and his call to boycott the LBC for hosting Nigel Farage's far-right rubbish. He shouldn't have been on the SPLC list, but it's not like he's completely innocent and benign.
Corbyn should sue him for calling
Yeah,
him
exactly.
anti-Semite.
I would suggest that Corbyn sue. New human waterboarding on the lake is a time-honored waterboating on the lake is a time-honored American pastime. Thames Darwin. Michael, I can't call in, but I need to talk about the sentient pile of wet leaves and pond scum that calls itself Jim Jordan. Aside from being a garbage human, he's also a really shitty representative and has a strong progressive Democrat running against him. I didn't know that. Now, I know she isn't perfect, but I take a ham sandwich over Jim Jordan. Her name is Jane Garnett, and her website is www.janegarnett.com. She needs donors, but most importantly, she needs volunteers. Thanks for spreading the word. People, yeah.
Ham sandwich would be more proactive on abuse issues.
Yeah, I was going to say a ham sandwich would be like, oh, excuse me, I know I'm an inanimate piece of food, but I think the doctor is trying to fuck the kids. Maybe we could do something about that, which Jim Jordan would not do. ADMC, I'm right there on the way you guys see religion. I don't believe in anything close to God, but I have legit spiritual experiences in nature. No drugs involved, just a genuine connection to the world around me. Yes, no doubt. Galexicon, I 100% agree with Jamie's comment about the term secular humanism being a way better of describing ourselves, but what we do believe in rather than what we don't believe in. I used to have it as part of my Twitter bio until a few years ago when, oh, Jesus, when one of Jamie Kilstein's buddies, including his then wife, came at me claiming it was cover for white supremacy.
What?
Yo, that whole 2013 call out Twitter really lost their minds. They were bananas crazy. I mean, they still are, but they're less prevalent. Meghan McCain. Okay, with the final I am, I will do this because I enjoy this impression. Meghan McCain with the final I am of the day. Oh my God, socialism is scary. And these people in Venezuela eat rats. And I wouldn't eat a rat to save my life because I respect myself. God, bless America. Oh my God. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. We're back live tomorrow with Benjamin Dixon and Ben Mankiewicz.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar.